Hi, I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix. Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold those in power to account. We tell you what matters, how to fix you, and why you should care. Labour unions took to the streets last week to protest the dismal state of the economy and to show support for the president's anti-corruption campaign, saying it is the working class and the poor who are most affected when politicians and business people are caught with their hands in the till. They also slammed the government for not introducing policies which they say will enhance the quality of life of workers who are buckling under the jobs bloodbath, deepening inequality and growing poverty. Joining me to discuss their demands is the General Secretaries of Cosatu and Saftu, Bheki Nchali and Zwelinzima Vavi. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining me here on The Fix. Bheki, let's start with you. You, of course, took to the streets. Your demands are well known. The President, after the Cabinet Lekgotla, announced that they are going to be having a special session of the National Assembly to deal with the economy because, according to the President, it's extraordinary measures. Let me start off by asking you, as Cosatu, do you welcome this measure of the intervention by the President for Thursday?
We welcome the statement, but we have not seen the document.
When you say you haven't seen the document, are you referring, Bheki, to the government's economic recovery plan? Because this document was heralded as the consequence of negotiations at NEDLAC.
What normally is negotiated at NEDLAC, if you're still going to go through the processes of cabinet, you don't know what is the outcome from the cabinet. So I can't talk to a document that I have not seen as of now and how it looked like after it's been processed through the government processes. Sometimes it comes in a different shape and it comes out in a very different shape from the original document.
All right, let me bring in Mr. Vavi. So, Zwelinzima, Saftu is not represented in NEDLAC. You have seen versions of the document. Let's start with Thursday's initiative. Do you think it takes us closer to where we need to be?
Not at all. Sorry to say that both the NEDLAC document and the cabinet document they're going to be announcing on Thursday repeats exactly the mistakes, if there are mistakes. I think that they are deliberate statements of the ideology of the government. They're going to repeat exactly what we have heard, repackage it as if we have not listened to a presentation of GIE, of NDP, ASGISA, of IPAP, and of other documents of government. They're rearranging and working around the periphery of the problem. Even though the document from cabinet actually does point out some of the weaknesses with the economy today, such as slow growth, such as underdevelopment, high levels of poverty and unemployment. But if we had a chance to participate, we would have insisted that the crisis of the economy goes much longer, much more bigger than what they are prepared to do.
Okay, Bheki, let me bring you in here. Obviously, there's process issues that are really important. There are structures like NEDLAC that have been set up. Some might say it's inadequate, but you yourself have said that what is often negotiated at NEDLAC and what eventually comes out from Cabinet aren't the same things. With the crisis in the economy as it stands, how important is it that all the social role players are actually on the same page about what it is that is being tabled to take us out of this crisis that we find ourselves in?
Every contribution, wisdom is important. The question of people participating one way or another, I think is up to the different organizations to do that. I can't speak for them. I can't speak for Netlight. I can only speak for ourselves in dealing with our contribution that we're making, considering that what is negotiated in Netlight, the cabinet normally is not binded by it. So the question of how Netlight structures in terms of consultation and how the cabinet decides, I think there's a disjuncture in between the two, and the question of the implementation, Netlight social partners are not involved.
Okay, so we know that there's a problem with process, Becky, but let's come to the substance. I've had a look at, some of the suggestions that have been put forward. There's a 7-point plan. It's the usual thing. So it's job creation through, expanded public works programs. It is infrastructure development. There's an emphasis on localization. And then, of course, we're talking about SOEs and sorting that out. So nothing really new, nothing imagination, that blows the imagination. If we talk about the jobs crisis, what is it that Cosatu is putting on the table that's different from what we've had before that you want government to take seriously?
I think you need to take time to look to that document. The first issue that we raised is Cosatu in that engagement was the question of energy security supply. That unless you sorted out the issue of the energy security, you are not going to get many people investing in our economy. The second issue will talk about the question of the infrastructure. That unless you invest and you put some stimulus in the infrastructures, you are not going to go anywhere. That until you compel businesses to deal with the impact investment, which go closer to the question of the prescribed asset and to be able to unlock money coming to the economy, and that business should not just depend on government for investment. They need to take risks. That is their business that they need to be doing. Sorting out the question of the port of entry, avoiding the South Africa being a dumping area, needed to be dealt with. The question of corruption is in the document that we submitted to Netlight. I'm not sure what is the outcome now after the cabinet, but in that document, we tried to look for 3 phases. The immediate one, we said something must be done within the 6 months. It must be quantified in terms of how many jobs will be created, and the question of the money coming from government, because in any recession, government has to put new money, not just reallocation, but put money in a bigger way. And our issue was that unless you put about $1 trillion or more, we're not going to save this economy.
Okay, Becky, hold that thought. Zweli, the question of money is often put on the table as a stumbling block to rolling out more interventionist action from the side of the state. If you speak to people like Tito Mboweni and business people who hold that view, they will essentially say that we want to spend money that we don't have, and that we need to manage, our debt ratio, debt to GDP ratio. You obviously hold a different view. How radical do you think should be the approach that needs to be tabled now? How much more should we change to the existing policies of the last 25 years?
Oh, no, unless we can completely overhaul the whole economy and make it an economy that is based on meeting the most basic needs of our people, for employment, for poverty eradication, for inequalities or addressing the crisis of inequalities, addressing the ecological crisis that is visiting South Africa, ensuring that women's contribution in the economy is recognized, ensuring that the youth do not see their future disappearing because they become the face of these massive levels of unemployment. Unless we can address the issues of property, because the crisis of South Africa is not just it is still an export-orientated economy, which we are afraid. The Netlight document and what the government is going to be announcing on Thursday still reinforce a type of infrastructure development that is based on mega projects that will be based on exporting and domination by multinational operation of even the energy supply.
Okay, let's pause there on the question of energy. Becky, you have spoken about the fact that energy is obviously central, and the security of our energy supply. Now, obviously, you can't have a conversation about energy without talking about Eskom. We have the discussion around, the way in which Eskom must be managed. There's a, breaking them up into three different areas, and just last week De Ruyter argued that he would welcome the private players that will be coming into play. And it's often when we come to this level of detail in the sectors that the agreements at NEDLAC or wherever it's made comes apart. So quickly, just on Eskom and on energy supply, does Cosatu welcome the entry of new players into the market, particularly when we talk about different forms of energy? Becky, let's start with you.
What we indicated from the beginning is that, for an example, you may need public to public. For an example, the gas is going to be the new player in terms of replacing some of the coal-fired power station. Now we know the gas is coming from Mozambique. We know that there's a pipeline from Mozambique to Sasol, owned by Sasol on one hand and the Mozambican government on the other hand. Our indication of welcoming a new partner is that the Mozambican and the government should be the one that own that pipeline and own that particular gas jointly. So we're not sure about the new player that is coming up. We've not seen details of that in dealing with those issues. But our view has been always that the question of energy should be handled by the state, so that because it becomes expensive when it's handled by private sectors whose main interest is to make profit. And if we allow that one, we may go to a stage where it becomes unaffordable for ordinary and vulnerable people.
But Becky, let me put it to you and to you, Zweli. Electricity, energy is already unaffordable, and it's in the hands of the state. Eskom has a monopoly. I mean, if you look at the rise in electricity prices over the last 10 years, we've had over 100% increase in that. So is the answer necessarily, Zwelinzima, as Becky and Charlie said, state control? Because two things with monopolies, whether they are privately owned or publicly owned, is that you have inefficiency and corruption, and we've seen that on a scale untold in Eskom, and we've also seen no competition in terms of prices. They can literally price, as they want. NERSA puts up, an argument, but we don't always win. I mean, the price of electricity has just skyrocketed and placed it outside of the purview of ordinary people. Is private, state capacity and state ownership necessarily, A, the most affordable, and two, the most efficient?
You mentioned one state-owned enterprise in the context of the ANC rule of 26 years, and your heart just sinks because you remember the levels of incompetence that are as a result of wrong deployment based not on competence and skills and experience, but based on proximity to certain politicians who will be in power factionally at a particular time. So it's not just Eskom that have been destroyed. It has been PRASA, Dinel, you name them all. Your problem then doesn't become that the state is inherently inefficient. The problem is that you have a government that is based on crony capitalism, on the friends that must be deployed even when they have no capacity. In the process, you then discredit the whole concept of a role of the state in the economy, such that today, when you say we need a renewable energy in the hands of the working class and the communities, people say, oh, can't you see what have happened to PRASA? Can't you see what have happened to Dinel and Eskom? It's not the ideology and the policy that is incorrect. It is just that we have a government that is based on nepotism, cronyism, and that discredited the whole
Okay,
concept
hold that thought
of
as
a
well,
state-owned.
Nzima. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we look at what the nexus is between corruption and the terrible state that the economy finds itself in. Stay with us.